the shop. I'm BJ with Low-Comotion Classics Garage here. Today we're working on a 65 Corvair. Now this is a 65 Monza and Corvair Monza. It is a 140 horsepower car. So it has the 4 carburetors on it. It's automatic and convertible. The brakes work really well, but customer would like a power brake setup to assist. We're not going to do any disc brakes, but we're going to add a power brake setup. So I'll show you what I've got going on here with it. So currently it has the single master cylinder, so that would be original. Now we're going to install this dual master cylinder set here. So we've got a master cylinder. I've got a booster. This is a 7-inch booster. Okay. And then I bought a couple of different brackets to try and get this to mount in here. They don't really have a bolt-in kit. And even you'll find with a lot of bolt-in kits, they're not always bolt-in, right? But I found this kit here. It's more of a generic kit, but I think I can make it work. We're also going to run a vacuum pump. Now I got all this stuff, everything except the bracket, I got from Master Power Brakes. So this is their quiet, it's a super quiet little vacuum pump that we're going to run the vacuum brakes on for that booster. It is supposed to be much quieter than the other ones out there on the market, so we're going to give it a try. Now, one thing that I'm going to run into here is this. If I come straight out with this booster, you can kind of see I'm going to hit the floor of our trunk slash front end compartment here. So I need this bracket to help me come up and then out. And so those offset bolt holes in that bracketry I think is going to help make that happen. And I went with the 7-inch booster to make sure that I still will clear the hood and everything. So first thing I did is remove the pedal. That master cylinder is just sitting there to show you, but it's unbolted right now. And then I needed to figure this ratio out. Okay, so here is my brake pedal that come out of the car. Okay, and Master Power Brakes suggests that we have a 4-to-1 ratio on this setup. And what they mean by that is the ratio from the center of the pedal to the center of the pivot up here. Okay, we're going to take that measurement, and then the factory hole is this top one. This is what the factory hole was. We're going to take that measurement. Okay, so center of the pad to center of the upper pivot, center of where the master cylinder attached. Okay, had this clevis attached here on the pedal to center of the pivot. All right, so we take those two measurements. It's in blue here, 11 inches, and then the original hole 1 7/8. And we need to know that ratio. So that ratio is 5.9 to 1. The brake company I bought this from, they suggest on Power Brakes that we get closer to a 4-to-1 ratio, or as close as we can be to that. Okay, so I did a little quick math. I knew this was 11 inches in black here. I needed to know how far to place this hole. All right, so I did a little algebra. Those of you that say you're never going to use algebra in life. Okay, 4 times what number is going to give me 11? All right, because I need to work backwards. Okay, I could either divide by 4 and get that number. Okay, that's basically what I did here, is solve this 4x equals 11. Divide both sides by 4, gave me 2.75 inches, or 2 3/4 inches. So that told me the hole from the center of the pivot, center here, to center of that hole needed to be 2 3/4 inches. So that's what I did. I drilled a new hole. I beveled it with my step bit. The Clevis just has a little pin that goes through there. So if you've worked on these, you're kind of familiar with that, or worked on any brake setup. They're all very similar to that. But that's what I'm working on now. Got the brake pedal drilled, and now we're going to focus on trying to figure out how we're going to mount this bracket and booster and get all of that set up in there. So back working on the Corvair, and I had to get some brackets made, so it took a little bit of time here. So these are the brackets that I ordered. They came as a whole kit with pivots, push rods, all that good stuff. But these brackets were too short. So what I did was had these brackets built. I took these up to a machine shop. Actually, I made a, I drew up a little cardboard cutout of what I wanted to do. And so actually I just needed to extend this bracket. So this bracket mounted on the firewall here, but it was too short here and the booster wouldn't fit with the push rod and everything that was hitting the firewall. So I needed to extend this bracket from this side out 2 inches. I wanted to leave this pivot point. I needed to leave this window here because that's where one of the push rod pins goes. So I just needed to extend this section, this end of it out 2 inches. So that's what I did with this bracket. Okay, flip that around for you. So that's what it looks like there. Just 2 inches longer. Okay, so now I've got this ready to mount. And push rod, I've done a little measuring on push rod. I've got an adjustable push rod set up here. Ended up using a couple different kits to make this, and nothing's locked down yet, so because I need to fit it again, so I'm going to fit it back in there. I did also mount the vacuum pump, routed the wiring inside the cabin, and the battery is located at the very back. So I ran a heavy gauge power wire and ground directly from the battery, and they basically attached to this just on the other side of the firewall. And I installed a fuse. It has like a 15 amp fuse on it as well. So this pump, this is the vacuum pump. It's a special quiet vacuum pump made by Master Power Brakes. And it had to be mounted vertically like this. It couldn't be mounted horizontally. Somehow it affects how the pump works. So we needed to make sure that that is mounted vertically. It has a switch in here that will shut this off as needed. So it's somewhere between like 18 and 25 pounds of vacuum is where it's going to keep it in that range. So every time it's turned on by key power, okay, has a relay mounted with it. So when the key's on, if it doesn't sense enough vacuum, then it's going to turn on. If it has enough vacuum, it's fine. Every time you hit the brakes, it's probably going to kick on. This is mounted right on the firewall on the other side of the cabin, obviously, but I wanted to make sure it was quiet. It has rubber mounts for the pump, so it's supposed to keep all of that noise down. Generally, I think when the customer's driving this car, you know, they're going to have the windows down anyway, so you've got that wind noise and that sort of thing. But at a stoplight, the car runs really quiet, so we want to keep that noise down. I did have to drill a couple extra holes here for mounting. The original master cylinder just had 2. The reason these are offset, obviously the contour of the firewall here did not allow for me to put a hole up much higher than that. So on one side the hole is a little lower. See in that bracket, I drilled an extra hole there, and then these will go within those 2 slots here. So that is all set up. I've already test fit it once without this push rod. So I'm going to test fit it again with this push rod. Make sure everything lines up. I'm going to put the brake pedal in, get all of that looking nice. Okay, I was able to find some spatter paint for trunk. It's a little bit lighter, but we're not going to paint the whole trunk, so I kind of tried to blend it in a little bit, but you can probably tell it's a little bit lighter. This other stuff's been on there a while, so it's probably a little dirty as well. So I'm going to get this installed. You couldn't really see it very well the other day, but it has this pivot point. Pivot point here, this is a rod that goes through the firewall, and then the booster will attach there. So we've got a rubber boot, and then this threaded on collar so that we can adjust it in and out a little bit as needed. So I had to do some trimming to get it the right length so that it will fit correctly. So this will give me a little bit of play while I get it mounted. And get that pin for the booster in there. Then lastly, I want to make sure that it's sitting level. And I'm leveling it. It's sitting on jack stand, so the car's not quite level left to right. So I'm just trying to match what the car is. Now I'll go put these bolts in from behind. They should slip in there. We'll get some washers and some nuts on that. And then kind of finish getting this mounted up. But that's where we're at right now. Looks pretty good now. I like the way it looks. Sitting there all black. Once we get those brake lines plumbed in, it'll look really nice. So I'm back at it today. I was able to get the fittings that I needed and some line. Kind of got started late on recording here, but I needed, you have to bench bleed these master cylinders. So if you've never done that, read the instructions, but basically you mount it in a vise, run these tubes from both outlet ports back into the reservoir. Of course, fill those two reservoirs with fluid, and then you're going to use like a big screwdriver from the back and just slowly pump this and bleed all the air out of the system. So you need to do that on the bench. Doing it on the car, it's very difficult, if not impossible. I've always just bench bled them, never had any trouble there. So then I started building some lines. I needed some different fittings because the block here, I don't know, it's like 1/4 inch, I believe, and then this is 1/2 inch up here. So I want my lines as straight as possible. So this looks nice and neat when so get the line trying to come down pretty parallel to that angle in the trunk. Then we bend 90, go underneath the master cylinder. So generally when I'm making these lines, you can buy this in a roll. The problem with the roll is it's hard to make it straight. You know, there are some ways, like I've seen guys drill a hole in a piece of wood and pull them through there and get it pretty straight. But I just like the straight pieces. And they come generally, this is a 3/16 tube. Not gonna go quite 90. I wanna put it in there. And I want them to run. I think I went a little too far. As you can see with this copper, just be real slow because you don't want to kink it. You can bend it back just enough. So now what I'm going to do is mount this and make sure that I'm parallel and I'm happy with where I want it. I zoom in here, you can kind of see how that one's a little more flat, and then this one's starting to go up the curve. So that was almost a 90, and this is even a little less. But as you can see, I want them to run pretty parallel with each other. Where my bend is going. And rarely think about it before you make your bend. It's easy to bend it the wrong direction. Done that a few times. Maybe. Let's try here. out my bin. So I finished plumbing this, the back part of the reservoir in this master cylinder. Got it finished up. Ran the vacuum line. Tested for any leaks. I had a couple little spots. I just needed to snug it up a little bit. It was just kind of damp. And then I bled the brake system. So I always start at the back passenger farthest away and then work my way closer. So I bled it. I've run probably a quart and a half of fluid through here, so it's all brand new fluid in the system too, so that's nice. I'm gonna turn the key on real quick so you can hear that vacuum pump. There's like 0 vibration, which is nice, and it's pretty quiet. Just kicks on for a little bit till it builds up enough vacuum and it turns off. Use the brakes a couple times, it'll kick on again. Yeah, 0 vibration on that, so it's really nice. I have a few other things to button up on the car, but I'm going to start it soon and just make sure all the brakes feel good. While it's still up on jack stands, I'll put it in gear and kind of let the rear wheels rotate and stop a couple of times before I take it down off the jack stand. This is where we're at on the Corvair. I did get the brake system all completed like I showed you earlier, and I test drove it, and it worked incredibly well, almost too well. It was very touchy. You had to have a real light foot on it. And it wanted, if you went a little too far, it wanted to kind of lock up the brakes. So I called Master Power Brakes and talked to them. We discussed a few different options. Since it's all drums, we talked about maybe adjusting the, turning the adjusters on the drum brakes themselves, like turning them in where you have a little more leeway or a little more movement. But in my mind, I just didn't think that was gonna be a good option. It might give me a little more pedal movement, but I also had to think about emergency brakes. This doesn't have a park, so I want the emergency brake to engage well, and if you pull those in a little bit, it's maybe not gonna work as well. So this is what I did. I tried going back to the original hole on the pedal. We talked about that ratio. Master Power Brakes had suggested a 4-to-1 ratio since we were going to power. And we did discuss that briefly. He thought that that could be an option. So the original hole on the brake pedal gave me closer to a 6-to-1 ratio. But I went back to that original hole on that brake pedal itself, and that seems to have helped quite a bit. The power brakes work fantastic. It's working great. If you have any questions, leave me a message. I will get you as many part numbers as I can for this job, and any other pieces of information I feel that will be helpful.